There we go. All right, so we are recording. So if you have to miss any part of this, you can always go back. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel and our website. And then I know if you know any of the other teachers, if they're coworkers of yours, I know I have a couple that said that they were teaching summer school and needed to view it a little later. So I'll send you guys all the links to be able to go and view it later today. So we have one more joining us. Hello. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start off. I'm just going to give you some information that I like to start with. Let's see. All right, so just to kind of talk a little bit about me. My name is Christina. So I am the education coordinator here at the DuPage County Farm Bureau. I grew up on a farm in South Central Illinois. And so my family raises corn, soybeans, wheat, beef cows, and pigs. And then I worked on my aunt and uncle's berry farm that's open to the public. And they do all types of different fruits and things. So I've kind of always been around agriculture. I didn't necessarily think that it would be a career for me. So I ended up coming up here to the Chicagoland area and going to school at Concordia University, Chicago. And I majored in communications. And then for the past this is my 7th year working for the Farm Bureau. I started off here doing their membership and programming and events and things like that. And then I took over the education coordinator position when our last person left back at the end of 2019. So just in time for the pandemic and for everything to change. So it's been a really interesting time here, just redoing our whole program. And I know most of you guys have used us in the past. I know I have a couple new people who have not. So we're really excited about our program. We did a lot of virtual things this year, and I'm going to kind of go through some of our virtual options and field trips and things that you guys might be able to use in your classrooms too. So that's just a little bit about myself. And I also like to start off with some fast facts about DuPage County, just because we need to realize how important it is that our students are learning about agriculture. So in our county, this is based off of the 2017 Census of Agriculture. So they do the census every 5 years. So there's another one coming up, I think, next year. So as of 2017, we had over 900,000 residents, but only about 0.5% of those residents actually lived in a rural area. We know this, most of us live in the suburbs here, so we don't see a lot of big farms around us. There's about 77 farms in our county. Most of those are small, between 1 and 10 acres. And most of our ag sales are coming from things like nurseries, crops, floriculture, horticulture, sod, those type of things. But most of our state is farmland, about 75%. And Illinois is a really big state, 400 miles, about 400 miles north to south. So we have a lot of prime farmland here, and our students might not realize it. And it's really important to our industry because about 1 in 5 jobs is related to agriculture, not necessarily farming, but things like packaging and marketing, transportation, all the things that go into getting the food from the farm all the way to our table. So there's a lot of opportunity, and we want to make sure that our students realize how important agriculture is to them in their daily lives, as far as what we're eating, the clothes we're wearing, the fuel we're using, all those things are coming from agriculture. So just trying to give students an understanding that all the things that they're using in their daily lives are starting on the farm. So last year we did pumpkins, corn, and dairy as our topics. This year, we're going to do apples, livestock, and honeybees, or pollination. So I wanted to pick some things that you guys could use throughout the year, so you don't have to do them all at once. So apples is a really good one to use in the fall time when apples are being harvested, like September, October. Livestock, you can really do any time throughout the year. And then pollination, honeybees, that's a really good one for the springtime. So we're going to start off with our apples. And so apples are actually not native to North America. The apples that we eat here were actually brought over by the settlers in 1620. So the only apple that's actually native to our continent is the crab apple, which is not good for eating. It's really small, it's really tart, so it's not great. So when the settlers came over to Massachusetts, they brought small apple trees, seedlings, seeds, and started planting apples here. Now, most of these apples were actually being used for hard cider because the water wasn't safe to drink. So that was the major use, was making hard cider so they had something safe to drink. But they would also use it for things like apple butter, apple vinegar. They'd feed it to livestock, and maybe they would eat them kind of throughout the year if they dried them. So they actually used apples a lot in their everyday lives back then. Now, something that your students are probably somewhat familiar with is the story of Johnny Appleseed. And I think a lot of times we have this like Disney character picture in our head of Johnny Appleseed just being a really happy guy traveling along and planting apple trees. But there's actually a pretty interesting story behind him. So his real name was John Chapman, and he was born in Massachusetts in 1774. So what he's famous for is traveling on foot from Pennsylvania to Illinois and planting apple orchards along the way. Now, there was a reason he was doing this. It wasn't just for fun. In 1792, a company called the Ohio Company of Associates was trying to get people to move farther west from the Ohio settlement. So they wanted to encourage travel farther west. So they were making deals with the settlers that if they would establish a permanent homestead west of the Ohio settlement, they would give them 100 acres of land. Now, they had to prove that this was a permanent homestead settlement, so they had to plant 50 apple trees and 20 peach trees within 3 years. So that was kind of the deal. And if they did that, then they would get their 100 acres of land. Now, those apple trees would take about 10 years to actually start producing fruit. So it was kind of a big investment. So John Chapman realized that if he traveled ahead of the settlers, he could actually start planting those trees for them and then sell the land back to the settlers as they came through. So he was kind of doing some of the heavy work and then making a profit off of it. So he did this on his way to Illinois, and it's believed that he planted over 10,000 square miles of apple orchards. Now, back then, like I said, most of those apples were being used for hard cider, and most of the apple trees that he actually planted don't exist anymore because when Prohibition hit, the government didn't want people making hard cider, so they went through and cut down a lot of those orchards that he planted. But it is believed that because of him, some of those trees survived, and we have some of the varieties of apples that we have today because of John Chapman or Johnny Appleseed. So that's kind of the true story behind him. I thought that was super interesting. And this could be a good tie-in with apples if you read. I know there's lots of Johnny Appleseed books and things you could do with your students. So this whole past year, we've been filming lessons and virtual field trips with some local places. So I got to go to an orchard, Honey Hill Orchard. They're out in Waterman, so out kind of on the edge of DeKalb County. And they were super awesome, and they make their own cider. So I thought I would show you our short version of our field trip. It's just a couple minutes of their just cider process. So you can see how cider is made today. If you like this and you want to see our full version of the field trip, they've got a lot of really good information in it. It's on our website and our YouTube channel. So I just wanted to show you this clip so you can kind of get an idea of how apple cider is made today. Right, so hopefully that played okay for all of you guys. Zoom can be a little weird with that. So hopefully you were able to read the subtitles. I do have that short version on our YouTube channel if you liked that and wanted to show your students how apple cider is made. Also, I should have mentioned, if you have any questions or comments or ideas you want to share, feel free to unmute and tell us. We're a pretty small group today, so you know, I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any ideas you want to share with everyone, or if you want to put it in the chat, either way. So just know, you know, we'd love to hear comments and things from you guys. So, okay, so talking about apple orchards. So this is where we're growing our fruit. There's around 7,500 apple growers in the United States. Now, apples will grow in all 50 states, but only 36 states actually commercially produce apples to be sold. So these apple growers are growing there's three types of trees. So there's dwarf, semi-dwarf, and standard. And so you can probably guess by the names kind of what all those mean. So dwarf is the smallest of the trees. This is what most of our apple growers are growing. So these trees only get between 6 and 12 feet tall, and they actually start producing fruit faster than the other kinds of trees because they don't grow as much. So this is the most popular type of tree that's being grown. Then we have semi-dwarf, which is kind of the middle-sized tree that gets between 14 and 22 feet, and then the standard tree, which can grow up to 30 feet. So it's a lot easier for apple growers to be able to take care of a dwarf tree as far as pruning and maintaining the tree and picking versus if they were going to do a standard tree, which is much, much bigger. It would take more work and is a lot taller. So those are the three types of trees that can be grown. So where are we producing all of these apples? Washington, Michigan, and New York are the three top apple producers in the United States. Now, Washington is definitely the biggest. It produces about 58% of all the apples that we grow here. So you can see all of these states are kind of in the northern part of our country. So the apples really like that cooler climate. So we do grow apples here in Illinois, but we're not one of the top producers of them. So Washington, like I said, is the top producer. So some of the really popular varieties that they're growing are Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Granny Smith, Fuji Gala, and Club Cultivar. Now, Red Delicious was by far the most popular variety of apple up until around the mid-1990s. So about 70% of all of the apples that were being grown in the United States or in Washington were Red Delicious. Around the mid-90s, that is when all of these new varieties started coming out and kind of took over in popularity. So today, only about 30% of the apples being produced are actually Red Delicious. So I don't know about you all, but I don't really like Red Delicious. I would much rather eat a Fuji or a Gala apple based on taste and texture. So it's really interesting how they develop these apples and get the tastes and textures to change into what we like today. So new varieties are constantly in the works and they're always trying to come up with new things. So I found this TED Talk video I wanted to share with you. It does a really good job of explaining how the apples are created. Now I want to make sure you guys heard the sound on the last video, yeah? I mean, it was quiet. Okay, so I should turn up the volume. All right, I'll turn up the volume. And this way, because this one has talking in it, so I want to make sure you guys can hear it. Stop me if it doesn't sound good or if you need me to turn it up more. Oh, sorry. So someone said the sound is not good. I'll turn it all the way up and see if that helps. But you are hearing some sound on it, like my sound is shared. Yeah. All right. We'll try it again. I can also send, can't hear it. All right. Let me stop for a second and just make sure my sound is completely shared. All right. We'll rewind here. Good. Okay, perfect.
Have you ever walked into a grocery store and wondered where all those varieties of apples came from? You might find Snapdragon, Pixie Crunch, Cosmic Crisp, Jazz, or Ambrosia next to the more familiar Red Delicious and Granny Smith. These delightfully descriptive names belong to just a handful of the over 7,500 apple varieties in the world. This huge diversity exists largely because of humanity's efforts to bear new fruit. Fruit breeding is a way to fulfill the expectations of farmers and consumers who seek specific qualities in an apple. On the one hand, farmers may want them to be disease-resistant and to store well. On the other, consumers are swayed by appearance, taste, and novelty. So, breeders have to consider everything from how well apples grow in certain climates to their color, taste, and size. And sometimes finding the perfect fit means breeding something new. To create apples with desirable characteristics, breeders first need to find parent apples that carry those characteristics. Once the parents have been selected, they have to wait until the trees bloom in the spring. The breeder takes the pollen from one bloom, called the father, and transfers it by hand to the other parent bloom, called the mother, through a process called cross-pollination. Once the mother bloom turns into an apple, the seeds are collected and then planted. It takes about 5 years for these seeds to grow into trees that produce apples. But because of the way traits are inherited, all of the seedlings produced will have different sets of genes and characteristics. This means that to achieve a desired quality, it takes a lot of offspring, not to mention patience on the breeder's part. When a seedling does bear fruit with the desired qualities, it's selected for further evaluation. Of the original crossed seedlings, about 1 in every 5,000 makes it to this prestigious stage. They're then sent to new farms, where breeders can assess how various climates and soil types affect the plant's growth. The fruit of the seedling and its many clones must then be collected and sampled to ensure consistency. Breeders study about 45 traits in an apple, like the texture and firmness of the flesh, when it ripens, how sugary its juice is, and how long it stays fresh. Over several years, they weed out all the bad apples, selecting only those whose fruits are the best. These exclusive plants officially form the cultivar, or new apple variety. To ensure an exact copy of this cultivar, all apple trees must be grafted from the original seedling. Branches, called scion wood, are cut from the original tree and grown to generate more scion wood. Segments of these trees are then grafted onto rootstock. That's the lower section of another tree that's been chosen from a different cultivar for its superior roots and growing ability. Finally, this fusion creates a new apple tree with the desired qualities. Each new plant takes up to 4 years before it starts producing the fruit we eat. Apple breeding may be a difficult art, but it's accessible to all. Universities, companies, and even individuals can create new cultivars. But to fully own an apple, the breeder faces a final challenge: naming the fruit. After a cultivar is patented, a breeder chooses a name for its trademark. That final step grants them long-lasting rights over the apple and its clones. That name must be completely original, and the catchier the better, of course. With over 7,500 varieties and counting, that's why we have apples called Pink Lady, Sweet Tango, Kiku, and Evercrisp. The more we work with nature's bounty to breed new cultivars, the more creative and delectable these names will become.
All right, so now you know a little bit about how new apple varieties are made. So super interesting, and it takes a really long time to get to the point where we are with all these different varieties with different traits. So the video touched on apple tree grafting, so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. So when they're talking about cutting off the scion from one tree and putting it on the rootstock of another, the rootstock, so that's kind of referring to the roots and the size of the tree. So remember I said that there were dwarf, semi-dwarf, and standard trees. That's going to be determined by the rootstock. And then the actual scion or the bud that gets fused to it, that's what's going to actually create the apple variety. So they're cutting off the bud or the scion, cutting a V into the rootstock, inserting it, and then they'll usually wrap it with something like tape until they grow together and fuse and create that new tree. And that's how we're getting apples that are the same across the board. We don't want to go to the store and buy a Honeycrisp apple and then it tastes like a Golden Delicious apple or something. So this is how we're ensuring quality and standards for all of our apples all across the country. Now we're able to buy apples year round because of something called controlled atmosphere storage. And so these storage facilities, they regulate the temperature, oxygen level, carbon dioxide level, and the humidity so that we keep our apples nice and fresh and they don't start going bad. So apples, they'll usually lower the oxygen level in these facilities from 21% down to about 3%, so quite a bit. And this also increases the carbon dioxide. So it just keeps the apples fresh. And apples will go through respiration where they take in oxygen and emit carbon dioxide. So this kind of slows down the process of that too. So most of the varieties that we grow in the United States can be stored in one of these facilities for up to 12 months. So a lot of times the apples that we're buying at the store, like now, were actually picked last fall and they're still good. So like we keep apples in our refrigerators at home instead of on the counter. That slows the process. Same type of thing with these storage facilities as well. So in Illinois, we're not a huge apple producer here, but we do have some apple farms. This is also from the 2017 Census of Ag. So there's 521 apple farms in Illinois. I'm sure some of your students have probably been to apple orchards. We have a lot kind of up here in the northern part of our state. This takes up about a little over 2,000 acres. An acre is about the size of a football field. So we have around 2,000 acres of apples that we're growing here. And our state fruit is actually the Gold Rush apple. So if you're talking about Illinois and want to throw in some fun facts, the Gold Rush apple is our state fruit. It became the state fruit in 2008, and it's actually a crossbreed between a Golden Delicious apple and then an experimental variety that the University of Illinois, their breeding program was working on. So that's how we got the Gold Rush apple. Right, so I want to kind of end our apple portion lesson here with kind of what the apple trees are doing throughout the season. So apples are a really good thing to talk about with your students for seasons because the trees go through pretty distinctive things throughout the year. So in the late winter and early spring, this is when our apple trees are being pruned. We need to make sure they're a maintainable size so that we can pick from them easily. So the late winter, kind of when they're still dormant, that's when they get pruned. And the springtime is usually when they start putting out their blossoms. And this kind of depends, the timing depends on the variety and where the apples are being grown as far as, like which month they're blooming in. And so apple trees have a way that they actually determine when they put out leaves and put out their blossoms. They have to go through a chilling period where they're cold for about 800 to 1200 hours. And then that has to be followed by a warming period where they warm up for about 300 hours. So once those two criteria have been met, and it's warmed up and it's spring, then the trees will start putting out their leaves. And then a few weeks later, that's when they start putting out their flowers or their blossoms. So then we come to our all important step of pollination. So the apple trees do best if they are cross-pollinated, and they rely on insects for this. A lot of farmers will keep honeybees on their farm, or they will rent beehives to put on their farm to help with this process. So honeybees are a really big pollinator of apple trees. So for every one of our blossoms that gets pollinated, those blossoms are going to start growing into an apple. So this is kind of happening during the summertime. So you can see the two different steps here. I've got our really small, tiny apples that have just been pollinated and started growing, and then the larger ones. Now, farmers will do this thing where they thin out the fruit. Because if we allow all of the blossoms that were pollinated to grow into fruit, that tree is expending a lot of energy to make lots of fruit, and the fruit won't get very big. And we as consumers want our apples to be a really nice size. So they will go through and cut out some of those apples that have started growing so that the tree can kind of focus on making bigger apples. It would also be hard on the tree too if we allowed all of them to grow, because the branches get really heavy and could snap or break. So thinning is a big thing that happens kind of during the summertime as those apples are growing. And then we end up in fall, and we know this is when our apples are harvested. This is usually taking place between August and October. Somewhere in between there, depending on the different varieties of apples. Now, most of these apples are picked by hand so that they're not bruised or scraped or anything, so that they're nice for selling. And when I went to the Honey Hill Orchard, they actually showed me there's actually a correct way to pick apples, which is kind of interesting because the trees have already set their buds for the next year. So if we're pulling out parts of the tree with the apple, you're actually taking out some of those buds that are going to grow the next year. So you can see I've got it circled on there. So it's important that you just kind of twist the apple and pull it off so that you're not pulling off parts of the tree along with it. Now, at this farm that I went to, they pick their apples, sort them out, and then they use the nice, perfect big ones for selling in the store. And then the ones that were blemished or small or had like marks on them, those were then used for cider. So that's kind of how their process works. One last quick video, this one's super quick, but I thought this was kind of interesting because they are trying to work on robotic harvesters in a lot of different crops. So agriculture is becoming more and more technology driven. So I thought this was kind of fun. This might be a fun one to show your students. But this is an apple orchard in New Zealand, and they're testing out a robotic harvester for their apples. Right, so I don't know if that will be the future of apple picking. It is hard to find. It's a lot of manual labor, so it's hard to find people to pick all these apples because traditionally we're wearing big, heavy like bags essentially that we're picking apples into. So it's a lot of hard work. So maybe something like that could be the future of helping growers pick their apples. Great. So that's kind of like an overview of the apples. I hope you guys learned something new about apples that maybe you didn't know before. So next up, I've got some activities that you can do in your classroom. Like I said, this would be really good in the fall time. So the project that I've provided for all of you that was in your box are our apple crown life cycles. For those of you that participated last year, this may look kind of familiar because we did the pumpkin life cycle crown last year for pumpkins. So we really like this here. It's really cute, and I think the kids like it too. So it's the same basic concept if you're talking about plant life cycles, what plants need to grow. This is a really good one to tie in with all of that. So we've given you the construction paper pieces that are stapled together for the actual crown part. Your students will have to color and cut the life cycle pieces. And we really like to emphasize that we want them to color the pieces in the correct colors that they would be in real life. We want them to understand that this is a real thing. And, you know, there aren't like pink apple trees. So just make sure when you're going through this that they're doing it accurately. We want them to understand that this is a real life concept. So we go through our different steps, and you can review the different steps, how trees start as seeds, they then sprout, grow into a tree, those trees put out blossoms, the blossoms turn into apples once they're pollinated. Then we've got our big red ripe apple right in the middle. So I would put your big red apple on first, and I usually like to cover the staples with it. So if you put that on, maybe put it to the left just a little bit, because you're going to have to fit 3 pieces on one side and it's not completely even. So glue that on and then have them color and cut out their pieces and then go through each step, gluing them on in sequence, starting with the seed and then going to the right. And then you'll just staple them. You'll have to go around and staple them just on the back to make the crown. And so then they can all wear it. So I've given you all the samples for that. There, like I said, there are extra copies of things in your folder in case you don't have enough. You can make copies if you have extra students in your classroom. So this is our apple life cycle crown. Something else that we like to do with our younger students is the apple blossom tree, to talk about seasons or to talk about pollination. So this is something you could definitely do in your classrooms. It's really easy. So basically we're making a tree, and the picture that's on the screen here, this is the 3D version of it. You can definitely make it easier by just doing 2 trees on a piece of paper, or if you want to do like 2 trees and then glue them together. Either way. So the 3D one, you do have to save toilet paper tubes, which is kind of a pain, but I really like these. They're really cute because they can stand up. So you just need the tree topper. You just cut that out on green construction paper. On one side, we're representing the springtime with our apple blossoms. So you can either use pink tissue paper or a crinkled up construction paper and glue those on one side. And then a picture of a little bee to represent that our bee is pollinating our blossoms in the springtime, and you can label this side spring. And then if you flip it over on the other side, then we've got our apples that have been pollinated and have grown into mature apples for the fall. You can use those labeling dots that you can get at the store for like folder labeling dots. Those are easy. Or if you don't want to buy those, you can always do just circles of red construction paper as well. So then for your toilet paper tubes, if you're doing the 3D version, you just cut 2 slits in the side opposite each other so that you can slide your little tree topper in and it'll stand up and make a little orchard in your classroom. So this is super cute if you want to take the time to collect toilet paper tubes. I don't think I gave you the treetop template. If you like this and you want it, I can email it to you if you want the templates for it. So this is the apple blossom tree. Very fun for seasons and pollination. All right, and then we have the apple taste test. Now, I don't know what it's going to be like this fall, you know, with COVID restrictions and being able to eat in the classroom. This is really fun if you're talking about the 5 senses, or if you're talking about maybe similarities and differences, because who doesn't like a taste test? So this one's fun. You just need 3 different types of apples. The examples here are the Red Delicious, Granny Smith, and Golden Delicious, just because those are some of the more common types, but you could really pick any apple that you want. And then you just go through with your students. You could either do it as a group and maybe like take a poll, or they could do it individually. So you just go through and see which one they prefer, which one smells the best to them, looks the best, which they think is sweet or sour, crunchy or soft, and then have them pick their favorite so that they can understand, you know, that there are different types of apples while also experiencing, you know, the 5 senses as well. So this is a fun one. Like I said, I don't know if we will be able to do this, but it's a good option. And I think I put the worksheet in there for you to use. And you can definitely change and adapt any of these different criteria to what you want or what your students would like. So this one would be a fun one to do. All right, and then we have some book recommendations for you. So I've provided for you our Applesauce Day book. This one is really cute. This is a storybook, more so a story than informative. So this is following a family who's really excited because it's Applesauce Day and it's a family tradition to go to the apple orchard, pick their apples, and then make applesauce. So it's kind of going through the process of what they do to make their applesauce. And their grandma's talking about how she did it as a little girl and how the process is different. So it's really, really cute. You can also find applesauce crock pot recipes online too. So if you're interested in maybe making applesauce in your classroom with your class, I think it's pretty easy. You just need a crock pot and the ingredients and just let it cook. So this could be a fun tie-in if you're able to have food in your classroom this year. A couple other books I wanted to mention. So we have Apples by Gail Gibbons. This one is a very informative book. It goes through a lot of the information I shared with you today, but more on a kid-friendly level. So talking about how apples came to be, the different varieties, the seasons, the types of trees, those kind of things. So that one's a really informative book. And then our last recommendation is The Seasons of Arnold's Apple Tree. This one's also by Gail Gibbons. And so this is following Arnold. This is kind of a story, more of a storybook too. It's following Arnold, who's a boy. He has his apple tree and it goes through the different seasons. So while Arnold is doing things like building a tree house, his apple tree is putting out the blossoms, and they do this together in the spring. Maybe he's putting up a tire swing in the summer and his apples are growing and maturing. So it just kind of gives kind of a reference between Arnold and the tree and how the seasons kind of go together. So those are our 3 book recommendations for you guys. Yeah, so that kind of wraps up our apple section. Does anyone have any questions or anything you want to share? Feel free, either unmute or put it in the chat. All right, cool. Well, so our next topic this morning is livestock. So I picked these livestock because they give us multiple products. I know a lot of times it's kind of hard to talk to students about where meat comes from, and some parents don't like that. So I picked animals that are kind of a dual purpose so that students don't understand meat comes from animals, but then we also have our other products like milk and wool and eggs and things like that that we can talk about as well. So for our livestock section, we're going to talk about dairy cows, chickens, and sheep. For those of you that came last year, the dairy portion is going to be a bit of a review, but dairy cows are a really fun topic to talk about with your class, and most students drink milk, so they understand, where all of that is coming from. All right, so dairy cows. So Holstein cows are the most popular breed of dairy cow. That is the picture down here on the left, the black and white ones. So this is typically what we think of when we think of dairy cows, the black and white Holsteins. But there are a lot of other different breeds like Jerseys and Ayrshires and milking Shorthorns. And they can all be all different colors like brown, brown and white, red and white. So something we want to emphasize to our students is that all cows make white milk. We always get those kids who think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. Even in our older grades, like 3rd and 4th grade, some kids still think that. So we want to make sure that they understand that all cows are making white milk. We add in the chocolate, afterwards. So you'll notice in the picture here, we've got our Holstein cows that have ear tags. This is something fun you can point out, especially your students that have earrings. They can relate to this. So farmers have to be able to distinguish between their cows, and a lot of cows look very, very similar. So they'll put in ear tags, which is kind of like how we wear earrings. It doesn't hurt them. It's basically a plastic tag that you shoot a needle through, kind of like when we're piercing our ears. And they'll have a number or a set of letters or something to identify them. So the farmers can track them, track their nutrition, their milk production, their health, things like that. So these are our dairy cows here. And when we refer to a group of them that have both males and females, we really should be saying the term cattle, because cow is actually referring to females that have had a calf. So cattle is the catch-all term for like a herd that has all these different kinds of cows. So heifers are the females that have not had a calf yet. They're the younger females that have not had a calf. And then our cows are the females that have had a calf and are able to produce milk. So only cows can produce milk, and they have to have had a calf. So our calves are the babies. And then for the males, we've got our bulls. The bulls are the males that are used for breeding. And then the steers are the males that are not used for breeding. They're usually castrated. And usually for dairy cows, they're the ones that are sold off for meat. They're not used in dairy production. So in showing pictures of cows to students, I like to show them how you can tell kind of the difference between the males and the females. So up top here, we've got our female, and you can see her udder right there, and that is where the milk is stored. So I like to point that out to students. They know, they can see very much there's a difference. The male doesn't have the udder, the female does, and she's the one who is giving us milk. So most dairy cows, especially around here where our weather is not great, a lot of the time they live in barns. So this is something I like to talk about students to, referring to barns, kind of like how we live in houses. So I'll ask them like, what are reasons that we would keep our cows inside? So reasons like the weather, the temperature, keeping them safe from predators, making sure they have access to food and water so that they don't get lost. All of those things are reasons why we raise our cows inside. So we were lucky enough to get to go to a dairy farm in Campton Hills, Illinois. It's in Kane County, kind of close to St. Charles, called Lincadis Holsteins, and they gave us a full tour. So I have some video footage from them I'm going to show you guys, and then we have a full field trip. But they built this new state-of-the-art dairy barn that has a lot of robotic elements to it a few years ago. So this is called a freestall barn. So you can see the cows are free to walk around as they please. They've got their stalls where they can rest. And over here on the right, you can see where their food is. So they have constant access to food and water. You can see that they've got fans that run along the top and the side of the barn. So dairy cows can actually overheat pretty easily. So it's really important to keep them cool. And something that we learned was that dairy cows actually, kind of like how we like to sit next to our friends, they'll sit next to the same cow on a daily basis. Like they like to be next to their friend, which is kind of funny. So this is the freestall barn. These sides actually will open up during the summertime so that they have a full like open stall area with a cross breeze to keep them cool and everything. So as far as food and water, our dairy cows weigh around 1,500 pounds. So they have to eat a lot of food. They're eating around 100 pounds of food a day. And so that's made up of things like grains, hay, grass, and silage. So silage is like chopped up like corn stalks and hay and other grasses that's been fermented and kept in airtight containers or tubes. So it keeps it nice and moist. So the cows really like that. So the farmers will work really closely with veterinarians to come up with special diets for their cows to make sure they're getting enough nutrition. So something else, so we know that cows have sometimes we say they have 4 stomachs, but they actually have 4 compartments to their stomach. So they're considered ruminant animals. So they do this thing called chewing cud, where they'll swallow their food. They'll go down into the first part of their stomach, and then they'll regurgitate it, bring it back up, and chew it again. So that's chewing cud, and they do this for about 8 hours a day. So sometimes I'll have students pretend like they're chewing bubble gum so that they understand like what the cow is doing. And most kids think this is really gross or cool, one of the two. So while they're eating, they also have to drink a lot of water too. A dairy cow will drink around 30 to 50 gallons of water per day, which is about a full bathtub's worth. So a lot of water for their bodies to be able to produce milk. All right, so this is a quick video. So something we don't really talk about a lot of times is manure or animal waste, but it's a really big part of farming. So at Lincaitis Holsteins, they have actually a robotic scraper that will clean the stall. So I'll just run this real quick so you guys can see. So it kind of looks like a big squeegee that just scoops the poop and urine just kind of like out of the way, and it will just run constantly throughout the day at certain times. So it cleans the stall for them. So you can see it's pretty safe. They can just step over it, doesn't hurt them at all. But this is, instead of having to manually do it, this is pretty awesome. So some ways that farmers will use this, a lot of farmers will use manure as a natural fertilizer in their fields. So they'll collect it and then put it into manure spreaders and either spread it over the top or they can inject it into the soil. It's a really good way to put nutrients into the soil. Some bigger farms will have what's called a methane digester, where they'll collect all the animal waste and it goes into this big kind of like container or pit thing, and they'll add in bacteria, which will break down the manure into a gas and a solid. And the gas is used to actually fuel the farm to like make electricity. And then the solid part can be used as either like animal bedding or like a soil enhancer, fertilizer, things like that. So that's pretty cool. And that's on like really large scale farms that have a lot of animals. But it's a really cool way to help, reduce emissions from methane that's produced by animal waste. All right, so our cows have to be milked. They said usually their cows milk 3 to 5 times a day. I think if you're milking by hand, it's usually 2 to 3 times a day, or the farmer has to be present, not necessarily milking by hand. But these cows, their system on Lincaitis Holsteins farm is a completely robotic system. The farmer doesn't need to be present at all. So you can see all the cows have these tags on them. They're like collars. So they're tracking collars. So the machine will actually read their collar and be able to tell if they need to milk. So some cows like to milk a lot because they get a little treat if they go into the stall, but sometimes they don't really need to milk. So if they don't need to milk, if they've already milked like 4 or 5 times, the machine won't let them enter because it knows that they're not ready. But if they do, they enter through, it reads their tag, so it knows which cow is going to milk, and then it's all robotic. So this is another cool video, so you can see how the milking machine works. So pretty cool. It just attaches. It's got little cameras on each one of those nozzles, and it can just detect where her teats are at, go up and attach. And it's really gentle. It's kind of like a vacuum. It's like a calf suckling basically. So it doesn't hurt the cow at all. It's really gentle, but it'll just milk until she's done. And then when she's done, it just detaches, comes off, and then the cow can leave the stall and the next one can come in. So really cool. And then you can kind of see on this side, there is a computer screen here. So these computers are tracking all of the cows, and they keep a database of all of the cows' milk production. So you can see how your cow is milking over time. Maybe have to like adjust her diet or things if she's not milking very well, or check her out if there's something wrong. So this is a super cool way. It only takes about 5 minutes to milk a cow using a milking machine. If you were to milk by hand, it would take about 20 minutes, depending on how good you are. So these machines have made the process a lot faster. So once the cow has been milked, they actually will, the milk will be taken to a big refrigerator unit where it waits to be picked up by a milk truck. So milk is what we call a local food. It only takes about 48 hours to get from the cow to us at the grocery store. So it's a really fast process. So once it goes into those refrigerated units, the temperature of the milk is lowered to about 45 degrees so that no bacteria or anything will grow. And then depending on the size of the farm, a milk truck will come either every day or maybe every other day to come pick up the milk. So then it's tested for safety. So there's never any antibiotics in your milk that you would buy at the store or any medicines or anything. You know, like cows get sick just like we do, and they are treated if necessary. But if a cow has to be treated for sickness with a medicine, they're pulled from the milking herd and separated, and all of their milk gets dumped. So they're not putting any of that milk that may be contaminated with the other milk. And so they'll run tests on the farm to determine when all of that is out of the cow system, when she's safe to be milked again. So it's a big step. And then all of it is tested again once it gets to the processing facility as well, just as a double check. And farmers can get in huge trouble if they ever find any antibiotics. The whole shipment gets dumped, and you know, they could get in really big trouble for doing that. So your milk is safe from the store. There's not going to be any medicine or anything in it. So once it's determined that it's safe, then it goes through pasteurization and it's homogenized. So pasteurization, that just means that we're heating up the milk to kill any lingering bacteria or things that could potentially make us sick. And then it's homogenized where it breaks down the fat particles in the milk so the fat doesn't separate from the rest of the milk. So you've seen the different types of milk, like whole, 2%, 1%. That's referring to the fat content. Usually when it comes out of the cow, it's a little over 3% fat content. And that's kind of what whole milk is. It's a little less than when it comes out of the cow. And then 2% is 2% milk fat, 1%, 1% milk fat. So that's kind of the difference between the three. And then the milk is then transported to the grocery store where we are able to buy it. So this is something you guys can do with your students, and we're going to do right now because I'm sure we all need to like take a stand-up break. So if you're at home, I know a couple of you are in your classrooms, but if you're at home and you have a jug of milk in your refrigerator, each milk jug has a special code on it. It's usually 2 digits followed by a dash and then 3 digits. And so this is going to tell you exactly where your milk was processed at. So you can track your milk and find out where it came from. So the website is whereismymilkfrom.com. So we're going to do this right now. So I would like everyone, if you're at home, to go to your refrigerators, and you can either write it down or bring the milk back with you and hop on that website, and we'll just share where our milk came from. All right, looks like we've got one in Kemps in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. Did it tell you about how far away that is? I'm not sure where Cedarburg is. No. I would say it's probably, I would think within a few hours. It's usually pretty close. Where did you buy your milk from, Dawn? What store and what town?
I actually have an empty gallon and I'm not sure which one is the code.
I think it will probably be where it's 18-1951. I would assume that's probably the code.
I enter it, but it says can't find it.
Oh, weird. Yeah, because usually it's like those two numbers, the dash, and then 3 to 5 digits. That's weird. All right, so Dawn says she bought her milk at Trader Joe's in Naperville. So hers is coming from Wisconsin. So this is where the picture that I had of my milk. So I also bought my milk in Naperville, but I bought it from Aldi's. And so it told me that my milk was from Dubuque, Iowa. So about a 3-hour drive from where I'm at. Does anyone else have any they want to share?
My computer froze, so I missed some of that, and my screen won't turn on because Zoom doesn't work on my computer.
Oh no.
But are you telling me, I think I got the end of it, that the code that when you buy the milk tells you where it came from?
Yeah, it's where the processing plant where it was processed at.
That's so cool. Okay, I missed all that because I was frozen. Okay, thanks.
Oh no. Yeah. So yeah, when you're unfrozen, if you want to try it, just go to that website. And it should be that code that looks similar to what I had in the picture. 2 numbers followed by dash followed by 3 to 4 through 3 to 5 numbers. You just put it in and it should pop it up. So it looks like Cindy's saying that that she bought her milk at Mariano's in Lombard, and it came from an Indianapolis, a farm in Indianapolis. So pretty cool. It's pretty interesting that we all live in a pretty similar area, but our milk is coming from all different directions. So this is something fun you could potentially do with your students too, if you wanted to have them bring in some of their an empty milk container. And I think most dairy products have this code too. I think it's not just like a gallon of milk. I think a lot of the dairy products have the code on them too. Right, so this is something cool you can try. And I always like to take to Google Map it so that they can see exactly kind of how far it is coming from. All right, so that kind of wraps up our dairy section. Like I said, that one's super fun to do with kids because most of them drink milk and know about cows a little bit. So that one's super fun. So next up we have chickens. So there are more chickens in the world than any other type of bird. Which makes sense because we're raising chickens for a specific purpose, for meat and for eggs. So America is the actual biggest producer of poultry meat in the world, and we have a pretty big egg export as well. So there are a couple of different kinds of chickens. We break them into categories of broilers and layers. So broilers are the chickens that are used for meat production. So these breeds are going to be larger and have more muscle on them because they are growing essentially meat. They lay less eggs than a layer does, or lays them less frequently. A layer will lay eggs every 26 hours. So broilers will lay less than that. And they also grow faster too. So they finish growing within 6 to 8 weeks, which is pretty fast. Now, in the United States, we have around 25,000 farm families that are raising broiler chickens. So that's about 95% of all of the broilers raised. I think a lot of times we think of like factory farms, but the majority of our farms are family owned, and then those families are selling to the companies for their chickens to be processed. So about 5% are company owned, big company owned farms, whereas 95% of those farms are families that are selling to those facilities. And there are about 30 federally inspected processing facilities that process and market the chickens. So things like we've heard of, like Tyson and Purdue and places like that. So then we have layers. And so our layers are smaller, they're leaner, and they grow more slowly. So these are the chickens that are really good at laying eggs, and they lay on a regular basis. About 26 hours, every 26 hours, they'll lay an egg. And that's regardless if the egg is fertilized or not. So they're just constantly laying eggs. Something kind of cool is chickens are photostimulated. So they rely on light cues to know when to lay eggs. So a lot of chickens are raised indoors for the same reasons that we mentioned with our cows being raised indoors. So farmers will adjust the lighting throughout the year so the chickens know when to lay their eggs. This is the same with like turkeys and other birds too. So layers are really good for about a year. That's how long they're producing really, really well, and they start to taper off. So in America, Iowa is the #1 producer of layers, and most of our broilers are being raised down in the South, like Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi. So that's where they're being raised at. Now we know that fertilized eggs become chicks. So the eggs that we're buying at the store aren't fertilized, but the fertilized ones are going to grow into chicks, and their embryo is going to start forming as soon as they're fertilized. It only takes about 21 days from the time the egg is fertilized for it to actually hatch. So chicks have this cool thing on their beak called an egg tooth. So it's just that like end piece. And so this is what they're going to use to break through the shell to be able to hatch. So hatching can take up to 5 hours. It's kind of a strenuous process for them because they're tapping and then having to rest. They have to make sure they get a little hole so they have some oxygen to breathe as they do this. So around 5 hours is how long it will take. And then about 40 minutes once they've got the initial top off to be able to fully emerge. So it's a long process. Once they come out, they're really, really tired. They're all wet. So it's important when we hatch chicks that we let them be so they have time to recuperate and dry out and everything. So a lot of schools are interested in having chicks in their classroom. The DuPage University of Illinois Extension Service actually offers an embryology program for teachers that want to hatch chicks in their classroom. They do this every year, usually in around February. They'll have a class that you can take. Last year, I think they did it virtually. I'm not sure what they'll do this year, but they go through how you need to set up and use all the equipment. You do have to provide the equipment yourself, so it is kind of an investment, but you'll go through the class. They'll help you order eggs and teach you how to use everything. And then you can hatch chicks in your classroom and your students can kind of watch the process. Now you do have to set up somewhere for the chicks to go once they've hatched, which is kind of the biggest thing because around here there aren't a lot of places that want to take chicks. So that is one barrier, but it's a really, really cool program. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. The DuPage Kane Kendall University of Illinois Extension, and their office is in Naperville. So if you just Google their name, it should come up and have all the info about the embryology project. So chickens are naturally omnivores like us. So they will eat things like insects, small lizards, seeds, fruit, grasses or plants, I mean. So the chickens that are being raised on farms are fed a special diet. It usually consists of grains, soybeans, vitamins, and minerals that is, mixed by veterinarians with recommendations and things to keep them all healthy based on their breed and if they're broilers or layers. And so we know chickens don't have teeth, so they have a gizzard instead. So they'll eat small rocks, and then those rocks will mash up the food in their gizzard to help it digest. Right, some fun facts about eggs you might not know. So we know that there are like white eggs and brown eggs, but there can be all different colors of eggs like green and blue and yellow, I think even some pink. This is determined by the breed of chicken. So based on the breed, that's what color egg they're going to lay. Yolk color can actually be different too. So sometimes you might see yolks that are more of a deeper yellow color and some that are lighter. This is determined by the chicken's diet. So some farmers will feed their chickens like marigolds or dandelions, and that makes the yolk a richer yellow color. Eggs have tiny pores on their surface, so they can actually absorb tastes and smells while they're sitting in your refrigerator. So that's why we keep eggs in those cartons. It's to prevent them from soaking up the tastes and smells and getting inside the egg. Like I mentioned, Iowa is the #1 egg producer, and we can do an egg float test, which we're going to do now together. So you can determine how old an egg is, if it's stale or not, or if it's starting to get stale by doing an egg float test. So, get my bowl here. So you want to go to your kitchens. I'm sure everyone has a bowl and water and an egg. So what we're going to do is we're going to go fill up a bowl. It needs to be at least 2 inches above your egg. So fill up your bowl with cold water and grab an egg, or if you have a couple cartons of eggs and want to try to see if they're different, go ahead and do this and see if anyone has any stale eggs in their fridge. All right, I've stopped share so you guys can see my eggs here. So I don't know if any of your eggs floated. I had to remind myself to bring eggs today. I just had a note on my counter, bring eggs. And my husband was like, what are you talking about? So neither of my eggs floated. And I got 2 eggs from different cartons that we bought a week apart too. So I checked the expiration date on them, and neither one of them had reached the expiration date. So that's good. They're still good. And what I guess I should have done was see if to keep one past its expiration date. But it looks like both of my eggs here are fresh, even though I bought them on different weeks. So that's good. Did anyone have any eggs that floated or were like partially up? Hopefully not. We don't want those. Oh, yep, perfect. So your egg is fresh. So the reason that our eggs float when they get older, so every egg has an air sac inside of it. And when it's a fresh egg, the air sac is really small. But as it starts to age, the air sac will get bigger over time. And so that's what makes it buoyant and be able to float. So that's how you can tell if you've got an old egg, is if your egg air sac is big and it starts to float. So you can see in my picture, I'll reshare that. So if it starts to get old, it's going to start to like float up a little bit, and then stale, it's going to be kind of straight up. And if it's super old, which hopefully it never gets to this point, it will float completely. So this could be a fun one you could do with your students if you wanted to talk about eggs and chickens, and just see if you have any eggs, or making an experiment and keep eggs way past when they should be kept, and see them float. So that's our egg float test for today. Put that aside. All right. So kind of fun. All right, so I wanted to just kind of go through some of the labels that we see for poultry and eggs sometimes, because sometimes they don't mean what we think that they mean. So the first one is sometimes on poultry, you'll see hormone free. This actually doesn't really mean anything because it's illegal to use hormones in raising pigs and chickens. So sometimes, you know, this is more of a marketing ploy to try to get you to buy things. So hormone free usually will have the like little tagline that says federal regulations prohibit the use of hormones in raising poultry. So if you see this, it doesn't really mean anything. No poultry has hormones in it. Cage free. So this makes us think that our chickens are running free outdoors. This just means that our chickens aren't in cages. So most of the time they're still being raised indoors in big barns. So they don't need access to be outside to be labeled cage free. So they're still being raised indoors. Free range, however, does mean that they have access to outside, but it doesn't mean that they like are exclusively outside or can go wherever they want. A lot of farmers will have their chickens be raised indoors and then have like an outdoor enclosed area that they can go out into. So it doesn't mean that they're roaming free like in a pasture somewhere. They're still enclosed so they don't, you know, escape or get eaten by predators or things like that. So those are just some common labels that you'll see with poultry. Right, and then our last animal is sheep. There are around 200 different breeds of sheep. And sheep here in the United States are usually raised, the big places are Texas and California are the two places where we raise the most sheep here. And we're raising them for meat and for wool. So sheep have actually been domesticated for around 10,000 years. They were domesticated in Southeast Asia. And it wasn't until around 3,500 BC that then people learned how to spin wool. So they've been domesticated for a long time, but then wool production came on a little bit later. Right, so I didn't go through the chicken names with you. I figured you all knew rooster, hen, and chick. But for sheep, there are names for them as well. So ewes are females of any age, doesn't matter the age. Rams are the males that are used for breeding, and wethers are the males that are usually castrated and not used for breeding. So wether is usually the one people don't know about. And then we have our lambs, which are the babies. Lambs are usually born in the springtime. And something kind of interesting is ewes will actually, it's really common for them to have twins a lot of the time. All right, some sheep products. So we said they were being raised for meat and for wool. So I didn't realize this until I was researching. So lamb, when we order lamb to eat, it's meat from a sheep that's 14 months or younger. And then mutton comes from sheep that's over 14 months. So there's it's distinguished by their ages. Then we have wool, which is actually the fiber made from the sheep fleece. The fleece, when it's on, like as the coat of the animal, it's called fleece. And then wool is the fiber that's made from that fleece. So they're two kind of different things. And then we can also get sheep's milk, and sheep's milk is actually really good for making cheese. It actually has more nutrients than cow's milk. It's got a really high calcium content and vitamins A, B, and E. So it's really, really nutritious and is great for making cheese. All right, last video here. So I wanted to find a wool processing plant for you guys to see, because it's kind of interesting, and I don't think most of us have ever seen wool being processed before, but I do apologize because this is not American and the guy has a really thick accent, but they do have subtitles, so that's good. So this is just kind of going to go through how wool, once it's taken from the sheep, the process it goes through into making the actual fiber of wool.
We saw sheep being sheared last summer. The bales of wool are now being delivered to the Wool Marketing Board. Here the wool will be graded and sold. Look out! The bales of wool are first unloaded. The bales are then weighed so the farmer can be paid for the weight he has delivered. The wool at this stage is called greasy wool. It is full of the natural grease sheep produce to make the fleece waterproof, plus lots of contamination, such as dirt, dead skin, sweat residue, pesticide. The fleeces are first sorted and graded. The wool graders are expert at this, having trained for 5 years. We could give them a fleece and they would be able to tell us what breed of sheep it was from and what the wool would be best used for. This is important as different breeds of sheep produce different types and quality of wool, which is suitable for different uses. Once sorted, the wool is then packed into bales of graded wool. Each bale, weighing 400 kilograms, is then tested for fineness and colour. The graded wool is then sold at auction. Here is the modern high-tech auction. You must be very quiet so the buyers don't lose their concentration, get distracted and miss their bid. Being sold, the greasy wool is taken to Haworth scouring, where it undergoes its first treatments. Different grades of wool are mixed to give the right blend for the end product. The first treatment is scouring, which involves washing, rinsing and then drying the wool. It goes through 8 washes and 1,000 tons a day can be washed. This removes most of the grease and other impurities such as mud, seeds or thorns, which can be picked up by sheep when out in the fields. The grease which comes out of the wool is called lanolin. It is cleaned and purified and used in face and hand cream. The scoured wool is dried. It is now clean and white, but very tangled. This clean wool is sucked up by this giant vacuum cleaner and packed into bales ready for the next process. The tangled wool is then passed through a carding machine, which is a series of rotating rollers covered with pointed wire or teeth. It's the tufts of wool into individual fibres and removes odd pieces of hay and straw which may remain. If the wool is going to be used for making woolen items such as jumpers and other clothes or for carpet, then it will be spun. If the wool is going to be used for cloth, then it is combed. The clean, untangled wool is combed by running it through a series of teeth. removing short fibres and drawing out long ones to align them in one direction. With the long fibres lying in parallel, a continuous rope or sliver of wool is produced, called a top. Here's the difference before combing and after combing. The top is wound into a ball or bump, ready for spinning. Each bump weighs 22 kilograms. 20 bumps are packed into a bale. So how much does one of these bales weigh? The combed wool is now ready for spinning into worsted yarn, which is used to make cloth. It is very noisy in these factories. Have you noticed what the workers are wearing in their ears? Why is that, do you think? Here are some things made from wool.
Great, so just kind of a behind the scenes of how wool is processed. So I thought that was so some surprising products. So we think of animals based on like what they give us, like meat or wool or eggs. But a lot of things are actually made from the byproducts of these animals. So for sheep, it was talking about lanolin, the grease that you get from the sheep wool, and it's actually used in making a lot of different things like cosmetics and medicine, lotion, face cream, shampoo, all of those things have sheep grease in them. Some sheep intestines can be made into strings for musical instruments or tennis rackets. Bones can be used in making china and things like that. So a lot of our farm animals, their whole bodies are being used. It's not just the meat. Like for an example, like a beef cow, I think it's about 98% of the entire animals actually use. So we're not wasting anything. And it's used in all kinds of products that we just use on a daily basis and might not realize. So these are just some sheep products that we use. Okay, some wool fun facts. So wool actually can grow forever. I have a picture on the next page. I don't know if you guys remember Shrek the sheep. I think this was back in like the early 2000s, like 2004 or 5 or something. The sheep that ran away and came back, they found him like 6 years later, and his wool was just out of control, enormous. So usually farmers, it's really important to shear your sheep because just like we need haircuts, our sheep's wool grows continuously. And so it gets really heavy and hot. It can get infested with like bugs and get really dirty or full of like dirt and urine and things like that. So it can get really gross. So most sheep need to be sheared at least once a year, sometimes twice, depending on the farm. A pound of wool can make about 10 miles of yarn. Wool is actually UV protected, so it protects the sheep from the UV rays of the sun, and it's naturally flame resistant. So sometimes you'll see firefighters using wool blankets to help, put people out or something. So those are some fun wool facts. Here's Shrek the sheep. So this sheep was lost for, I think it was 6 years. And when they found him, he was just so overgrown with his fleece and his wool. So this was kind of a fun thing to show students. Right, so our livestock activities for you guys. So what we've provided for you to make in your classrooms is our little spinner barn. This one is very easy, very cute. So this is just kind of, you can review animal facts or animal names. So you want to have them color, and like our apple activity, we want to make sure that they're coloring accurate colors so they understand that these are real life animals and what they look like. So they color their barn, color their animals, and then they can cut out their animal circle. And then for the barn, they just cut on the dotted lines of the barn door so that it makes a flap. You could cut off the base part of this if you want to make it like shorter. I usually don't. I usually just cut up straight through. And then they will probably need help with the brad, sticking that through the hole. There's just a mark in the middle of both the barn and the spinner. So you just stick the brad through, connect it, and then you've got your little barn. that you can spin your animals around in. You can see that. You just go through the different animals. So they like this. It's very cute, very easy. Next up, we have the family match game, and I realized I forgot to put a copy of this in your binder. If you like these pictures and want the actual files to be able to print off, just let me know and I'll email them to you. They're just PDFs. But I've got a large version and a small version. So this is from the National Ag in the Classroom website. So these are the big size cards. They have the names on the back of them if you print them two-sided. So it will tell you the specific names of each. So like bull, cow, calf, rooster, chick, hen. So you can do like animal matching with these if you give each one of your students one and have them try to find each other's families by making animal sounds. It's a good way to review the animals' names. And then I have a small version of this where each student could have their own set and do matching like on their desks. All right, I see a couple people would like these. Yes, I will. If you send me an email after this with anything we've talked about, questions, or if there are things you want, links, these cards, I will email you back today and send you all the files. I did put in your folder, there's like an animal match worksheet where they just draw lines to the matching animals, and it's got their names on them as well. So that worksheet is in your binders. So that's basically just a worksheet version of this activity. All right, and then we have some book recommendations. All right, I see a couple people in the chat. I'll write your names down. So we've got Dawn and Laura and Olga would like those. Feel free to put that in the chat to you guys if you want those. All right, so the book I have given you is Clarabelle. So this one has real life pictures in it. This is more of an informative book than a storybook. And so this is following a dairy cow, a Holstein named Clarabelle on her farm. And it's from the point of view of two kid brothers as they're taking care of her. So it starts with her having the calf so she can produce milk, and then goes through like what she's eating, how she's being milked and cared for and everything. So this is cute, and it's got lots of like real farm pictures on it. So that your students can kind of see some behind the scene pictures of the farm. The other book I have is Down by the Barn, and this one is more of a storybook. This one's really cute. It goes through like animal sounds. It's about baby animals joining the parade on the tractor, and it goes through the different sounds that they make. So this one is kind of a fun one to read because you get to make all the sounds as you go along, and it's kind of in like a rhyming scheme. So this one is really cute, Down by the Barn. You could probably find it, I would assume, at like your libraries if you wanted to check that out. All right, so our very last topic I have for you guys is pollination and honeybees. So there's been a really big push, especially in agriculture, about conservation, conserving our pollinators and being more aware of how the things we do affect them. So over the last several years, there's been a lot of conservation efforts by farmers and people who work in agriculture to help protect our pollinators. So we really like this topic. It's really good. Like I said, for the springtime, when all of our flowers are blooming, and you see all the bees and butterflies out. So there are a couple of different types of pollination. We've got cross-pollination and self-pollination. So cross-pollination is moving the pollen from the flower of one plant to the flower of another plant. A really good example I like to use of this, if you were at our workshop last year, if you remember, pumpkins are cucurbits, so they have both a male and a female flower. And so this one is kind of cool to show students because there's a specific difference between them and you can actually tell. So this picture up in the left here, this is a pumpkin flower and it's female. And the reason you can tell it's female is because there's this bulb kind of at the end that once the flower has been pollinated, that is what grows into the pumpkin. So the male flowers don't have that. So I like to use pumpkin flowers as an example of cross-pollination. Then we have self-pollination, where the plant is able to pollinate itself. A good example of this is tomato plants. You don't have to have more than one tomato plant in order for it to get pollinated. So Plants can be fully pollinated, where then they grow their seeds and their fruit. They can be partially pollinated, where they start to develop their seeds and fruit, but don't develop all the way, or they could fail to be pollinated and then produce nothing. So those are the kind of the different kinds of pollination. So who pollinates? Most of our students know that bees and butterflies are really good pollinators, but actually there's a lot of different animals and ways that plants are pollinated. So other insects too are good pollinators, like flies and ladybugs and wasps. All of these also help to pollinate plants. So as they're flying along and eating nectar and getting pollen, the pollen will stick to them and get it transferred from flower to flower. So you can incorporate other insects as well, besides just the bees and butterflies, which are the ones that we commonly know about. Bats are also a really good pollinator. A lot of bats feed off of nectar. And so then they, just like the insects, the pollen will stick to their bodies and they'll help move it around. Birds are also pollinators. There's around 2,000 different species of birds that drink nectar. So the one that we're usually the most familiar with is the hummingbird. So some of you guys might have hummingbird feeders at your houses. So hummingbirds are really good pollinators. And then we have wind pollination. Wind pollination pollinates grasses, trees, and some of our field crops like corn and wheat. And so the wind will blow the pollen around through the fields, through the grass and the trees, and blow the pollen from place to place and fertilize it that way. And then we have water pollination, which is the least common type. It's usually only for things like water weeds and pond weeds, and the pollen will either float along the top of the water or maybe it'll travel under the water. Like I said, this is the least common kind. It's really only for those couple of things. So we don't really talk about that one as much. So that is who is pollinating all of our plants. So like I said, there's been a really big push for conservation efforts. So pollinator habitats are becoming more common. I have seen some around here in Carroll Stream, kind of like by our office. I know the fairgrounds has one, and farmers are putting these in as well, where they're planting native plants and flowers that bloom throughout different times of the year to help have a food source for the pollinators throughout the year. So we can do this in our yards or gardens if we want, just picking out native plants that bloom throughout the year. It's a really good way to help pollinators, and also providing a water source for them as well, like a fountain or something. Cover crops can also help our pollinators. So a lot of our crops are planted in the spring and harvested in the fall, but sometimes farmers will plant cover crops, which are planted in the fall and then harvested later in like the early summer. So a good example of this is like wheat, and it will start germinating in the fall time and then start growing in the early spring. So it just helps hold the soil in place. It helps give an extra food source to those pollinators as well. And then planting native grasses in buffers. So a lot of times we'll see fields that are surrounded by grass, or there might be like a stream or water source, and there's a big grassy area in between to help catch any soil runoff and prevent any nutrients from getting into the water. This also helps pollinators. It just gives them more of a habitat and an extra food source as well. So these are some of the conservation efforts happening to help save our pollinators. All right, so the pollinator we're going to talk about today is the honeybee, and this is the one that you'll probably talk about in your classes, and what our project is based off of. So honeybees are really cool. They are considered a type of livestock by the USDA. They give us honey, and they're great pollinators. In Illinois, we have 1,770 beekeepers raising bees, and that's based off of 2017. Right, so we all know there are different types of bees in our hives: our workers, queens, and drones. So the workers make up most of the bee population. They are all females, and they're the ones who are doing all of the jobs. So things like gathering nectar and pollen, feeding the larva, feeding the queen, cleaning the hive, guarding the hive, They literally do everything. So they are really important to the functioning of the hive, but they have a pretty short lifespan. They usually only live about 5 to 6 weeks when it's busy because they're expending so much energy. In the winter months when it's slower and they're not flying as much, they can live 4 to 6 months, kind of depending on what's happening. And then we've got our queen, which is the largest bee in the hive. The queen only has one job, and that is just to lay eggs. The queen will lay around 2,000 eggs a day. The fertilized eggs will either become worker bees or a potential new queen, and the unfertilized eggs will become a drone, or the males. So queens will live usually 2 to 5 or 2 to 3 years on average, sometimes 5. If they live longer. And then we have the drones, which are the males. They only make up about 5% of the hive. Their only job is to mate with the queen, and once they do that, they die. If they don't, then they will live, but the worker bees will actually kick them out of the hive during the fall time because they don't want to feed them over the winter. So the potential queens, like I said, the ones that were laid, they're fed a special thing called royal jelly. And so if they are fed royal jelly, they'll become a potential queen, and then they'll fight the queen. So as long as the queen keeps winning these fights, basically, she stays in charge. But if a potential queen defeats her, then that new queen takes over and starts that new job. So those are the 3 different kinds of bees that are in our hive. Something else you could talk about with your students is life cycles. You could talk about bee life cycles because they go through metamorphosis, going through those different body changes. So the queen will lay an egg in the honeycomb cell. And after about 6 days, that egg will turn into a larva. And the worker bees will feed the larva something called bee bread, which is a mixture of pollen and nectar. So they'll feed the larva, and then once they're done, they'll cap that cell with wax. And then that larva will change into a pupa. And the pupa doesn't eat. Its only job is to finish transforming into an adult bee. So the whole process takes about 21 days. And once that bee has fully developed, then they're going to emerge, chew through the wax, and come out and then start whatever job they're assigned to. So colonies and hives, sometimes we use these interchangeably, but they actually refer to different things. So the colonies, that's referring to the actual family of bees that live in the hive. So in a beehive, there's usually between 10,000 and 60,000 bees in a hive. And then the hive is referring to the actual structures themselves. So like the bee's house. So inside these boxes, there are frames. You can see in the picture, the beekeeper is holding one of these frames. So they're just frames that are coated with wax, and then the bees are going to build their honeycomb on top of it. So the worker bees have a special gland that secretes wax, and they chew it up, and then they form it into those 6-sided cells where they're going to use them to lay eggs in, and then also to store their honey. All right, so the worker bees are foraging for nectar and pollen. You can see in the picture here all that pollen that's stuck to the bee's leg. I like to show that to students so they can kind of see how that works. So they are foraging for that. They're going to take that back to the hive. And sometimes beekeepers in the times when there aren't a lot of flowers out, they'll provide their bees with sugar water so that they have a food source and a water source as well to make sure their bees are getting enough food and water. The nectar and pollen that's collected is taken back to the hive. It's used to make bee bread, and it's also used to make honey. So the worker bees have a special honey sac that they keep the nectar in, and then they kind of like regurgitate it, mix it with some enzymes that they have in their mouths, and put it into their cells of the honeycomb. And so then they'll flap their wings over it to help whisk out some of that moisture and speed up the honey process. And so that's where we get honey from. So I like to say sometimes we're eating like bee spit. So that's how honey is made. So once the honey cells are actually full, they'll cap it with wax to keep it safe. And so the honey is what the bees are going to eat during the winter time. So it's really important that when the beekeepers actually go to harvest their honey, that they don't take too much, because then the bees don't have enough food for the winter and they won't survive. So that's really important as a beekeeper to know how much honey you can take and how much needs to stay in the hive for the bees to actually be able to survive the winter. So we did another virtual field trip. This is a very short video just of some of the highlights. We got to visit a beekeeper and see some of his hives and his equipment. So the full video is on our website, but this is just some clips that I put together so you can kind of see some of the equipment and things that bees use. This would actually be a good clip to show your students because it's only a couple minutes long instead of our full like 15-minute video that gets kind of technical. Right, so just a quick video to kind of show you what the inside of a hive really looks like. So you saw the beekeeper using some different tools. So that tool that they pried the pieces apart with, that's just called the hive tool. And it's really important because the bees actually will wax themselves in and close off the hive. So you have to kind of break through the wax to be able to open it up. They also use a smoker to help keep the beekeeper safe as they go into the hive. The smoke kind of confuses the bees. He said it makes them hungry and confused so that they're not aggressive. So that helps them get into the hive. And then when they're ready for harvesting the honey, they will use something called a honey extractor, which is the picture on the right here. So when they're ready to harvest, they'll take out those frames from those top boxes, the supers, and they'll wipe off or scrape off the wax topping of those cells so that the honey is able to flow out. They'll put it in this big machine that spins really fast and the honey will actually just flow out. And then they're able to pick out any of the, if there's pieces of wax or anything, they'll strain it and then they'll bottle it up. And honey is super cool because it never actually goes bad. I read somewhere that they found honey in ancient Egypt, from ancient Egypt, and it was still good. So honey is one food that doesn't really go bad. It can crystallize, but you can always heat it up on the stove and melt it back down. All right. So that was a little bit about honeybees. So our honeybee activities. So what I've given you guys for your classrooms is our beehive glyph. So I didn't make you an example because this is based on people's preferences. So I gave you an extra copy so you can make yourselves one to show your students. So it's based off of your preferences. So basically this is all about following instructions and reviewing some different things about bees. So basically it just tells you to color the outside of the hive based on certain criteria, the inside, like for example, for the flowers, the review question is the bees drink a sweet nectar. How many sweet drinks a day do you drink? Color the flower pink. And then if you drink one sweet drink a day, put in 1 flower. If you drink 2 or more, put in both flowers. And then it's got things for the bees and vegetables and things. So this is something you can do with your students to kind of review some of the bee facts, and then you could hang them around your classroom and see whose are different based on their preferences, which is kind of fun. So this is the beehive glyph. It's very, very easy. You just need basically coloring utensils and scissors. So that one's super easy. You can also make paper plate bees really easily. So you just need a paper plate. You can use tissue paper, construction paper, cut it up, have your students glue it on there, make bee stripes. I would find a template for the bee head instead of having to do all the little pieces. I think that could get really tedious, but you can find like bee templates and things online pretty easily. So this is just kind of a fun one if you wanted to make some bees for your classroom. And then in your folders, I put in instructions. It's from the National Ag in the Classroom. It was for kind of like a pollination simulation where some of your students act as bees and some of them act as flowers. And so you use straws for the bees and then marshmallows for the flowers, and the marshmallows represent pollen. I think this would be really cool to do like in the springtime when you can get those mini marshmallows that are different colors. So if you had like your students, like one student had like the pink marshmallows, one had green, one had yellow. And then as your bees go around to different ones, they take pollen from each one and deposit it at another. So then they can see that the pollen is all spread out throughout the classroom. And then your flowers should have different colored marshmallows at the end. So they can see that, you know, these flowers were pollinated based on the different colors of marshmallows that they have. And then you could switch it and have them, you know, the ones who are bees be flowers and vice versa. So it's just kind of a fun activity. The instructions are in your binder. It's pretty simple, but it could be really fun. And then it's a good way to get them up and out of their chairs and moving around too. All right, so our bee recommendations. This is probably my favorite book that I've given you, The Bee Man. I really love this book. It's super cute. It follows a grandson and his grandfather who is the local bee man because he raises honeybees and makes honey. The rhyming scheme of this book is really fun. It flows really well. It goes through a lot of really good information as far as like the equipment that beekeepers use and how honey is made and the jobs of the bees and the different types of bees. Is really informative, but it's in a story version. So I really like this book a lot. I hope you guys do too. And then Flight of the Honeybee is another good one if you're looking for more bee books. So this is a story following a bee named Scout, and she's a worker bee who's going out to find the last of the nectar and pollen of the season in the fall, and kind of the things that she runs into, the obstacles. So like she'll run into like a bird or rain or a wasp that's attacking the hive, and kind of her process of getting the nectar and the pollen and bringing it back and trying to get her fellow bees to go to where the flowers are at. So this one is a cute one too that you could add in as well. All right. So that kind of wraps up all of our like lesson portion of everything. I hope you guys like that and learn something new about all of our different topics here. So just a quick to wrap us up, I wanted to share some online resources that are available to you, some different websites that we really like. So let me share here. Well, maybe not, come on. There we go. All right, so this is our state website for Illinois Ag in the Classroom. This one's a really good one. You can actually just type in the search bar, like if you're looking for specific things. So if you just type in like bee and then search it, it's going to pull up all of these different activities and lessons that they have that contain the word bee in them. So you can see there's like 10 pages of it. So this one's a really good resource. They also have this Beyond the Barn Door WordPress. So this is a new blog that they started where they have virtual field trips, videos of the activities actually being performed, different videos for things. So, and teacher workshops too. So if you want to check that out, they record all of their workshops, which is awesome. So you can watch them at any point. And they've got a lot of good things about it, a lot of different topics too. So this is our Illinois Ag in the Classroom. This is where I get a lot of our resources from. So some of the activities that you got today are from this website. I'm going to move to this next tab. Hopefully, are you able to see this? Good. Okay, perfect. So this is the National Ag in the Classroom website for the whole country. And so they've got this really good curriculum matrix. Click on it. So this one is awesome because you can do an advanced search and just click in that you want K through 2 as your level. And then you can put in a topic or just search all. And it's going to pick everything that's for our lower level grade school students. So I'll just click on this one for A for apples. So this one, since we talked about apples, if you're looking for even more things that you want to add in, you can click on here. It's got some things about the 5 senses, kind of like the thing I showed you. It's got the crockpot applesauce recipe if you're interested in doing that. So this website is really cool. I use this website a lot, the curriculum matrix portion of it. So definitely check this out. And then finally, our website. So this is for DuPage County Farm Bureau for our Ag in the Classroom. If you liked the videos I showed you, they are all in here, all the long videos. Our short video, the clips I showed you for like making cider and the inside the hive, those are just on our YouTube channel. But all of our full field trips are on here. Everything's under this AITC virtual learning tab. So if you just click on a topic that you want, it's going to take you to each page, and it's got a lesson that I've recorded, links to like ag mags and worksheets, which would be a little too hard for your students. They're at a 3rd grade reading level. But then it's got our full like field trip here, book recommendations, extra videos, things like that. So this is our website. We also have grants available if you guys are interested in implementing more agriculture projects into your classrooms. If you are interested in maybe the embryology project, this could be a good one. We can give you up to $250 to implement some sort of agriculture project. So some teachers will use it to buy seeds and potting materials, extra books for their classroom that are ag related, the embryology equipment, things like that. So it's up to $250, which is awesome. It's due November 8th. And then if you win, you get your funds around January, and then you have all spring to implement your project and then send in a report at the end of the year in May. So that's a good one. If you want to come back, and since we're recording this, I'm going to post this video on our kindergarten workshop tab here. Last year's is on here. If you didn't attend last year and you want to see what we did, last year's video is up here, and then I'll put today's recording on here as well. And if you like this, we do a big Teacher Institute Day. It's usually the last Friday in February. So we do that usually at College of DuPage. Last year we did it virtually. We don't know what we're going to do this year, but that's for K through 12. And we have a lot of different guest speakers and things. I know today you just got me, but we do myself and then several other people do that big 5-hour workshop. So that is our website and everything. So I think it's 11 o'clock. We're kind of at the end. Does anyone have any questions, comments, things you would like to share before we head out?
Hi, Christina. It's Dawn.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. My kids loved the activities and books last year, and I know they're going to love it this year too.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so great to hear that. I know that some of you, we used to go into kindergarten classrooms, and now we've stepped away from that. So we're doing this instead. So I want to thank you guys so much for still wanting to bring agriculture into your classrooms and attend. And, we're here as a resource for you. So if you have any questions or things you want from us, just let me know. And I think we're planning on continuing doing this each year. So we'll come up with new projects and activities and supplies for you all every year. So, yeah. All right, so on my list of people who I'm emailing the pictures to of the animals, I've got Dawn, Olga and Laura, Adriana and Michelle. Does anyone else want those pictures? All right, perfect. I don't see anyone. So just make sure you filled out that link I sent you this morning so that you can get your professional development hours. I'll send that to the ROE late this afternoon. And then she will email you directly with all of the paperwork you have to fill out to get those. So I think that kind of wraps it up. So thank you guys so much for attending. Hopefully your students have a good year and you're back in the classrooms and can do all of these fun things with them. So good luck with everything. And thank you so much again for attending.